Today we have Jen Smith, who is been a music supervisor for a bazillion years. She knows it all. She's seen it all. And she is now producing. So those of you who are doing music, movies, what an amazing producer to get on your side. And then Chris is a longtime attorney, does entertainment law. He is also a composer, an award-winning composer and singer-songwriter. And he is now directing and producing. And I have directed 6 feature films and 200 other projects and have been where everybody else has been, where it's like, I want that song, but they want too much money. So I guess Chris is going to have to write something that kind of has the same feeling. So let us start with, I want to get a popular song for my film, whether it's a short or a feature. What steps am I taking and how am I doing that?
Music costs money, right? I know we're all filmmakers and we have our child of our film, right? But music does cost money. And part of that is not just the popularity of the song, right? It has to do also with the writer. A lot of filmmakers think, well, this isn't a popular song. It's not going to cost a lot of money. That doesn't mean anything because there's intricacies within there, right? It might be a producer that worked on it, a songwriter that worked on it, who is, very big kind of like value, right? Just because you've never heard of the song, the artist, the songwriter, does not mean it has no value. So there's 2 sides to a song. You need the publishing side, which is the synchronization, and you need the master recording side, which is the record label, the artist, the band, right? There's both parts to a song. So you have to get both parts cleared. And music can have 2 writers, 13 writers, Beyonce album, a ton of writers, all those different things. And all of those different entities have to agree to the use, the timing, the fee, right? So if you just kind of like look up a song, you can go on like ASCAP.com, BMI.com that are free. You can kind of see who are the writers and who are the publishers you need to contact. So just like everything in the entertainment industry, it's all about who you know. Someone like, if Kate were to reach out to, say, Sony TV, she's going to have a very different experience as opposed to when I reach out. Because one, people like me, we have very deep relationships. They're going to give me a different quote than they give you, right? This entire business is relationship-oriented business. So you can look on ASCAP.com, BMI.com to see who wrote the song and who owns it, right? So you have to get permission from them. Excuse me, my air conditioning is going crazy. And then on the label side, that you have to reach out to see who is the label. Is it Capitol Records? Is it Warner Records? You have to reach out to them, to the different sync departments to get approvals. Let's pretend Chris and I wrote a song and he owns 50% and I own 50%. I think your film is great. I understand it's low budget. I'm fine at approving $1,000. But Chris is like,
greedy.
No, I wouldn't say greedy, right? He as a writer has more value in this current song than I do because I'm more of an indie, right? Kind of thing. So Chris will say, or his representative will say, no, the song's $20,000, right? So you have to get both parties to agree to the thing for it to be cleared and has to equal 100%. So if Chris says, who's greedy, says, actually, it's not a 50-50 split. I have 75% of the publishing. Jen does not have 50%. Then the song's in dispute in publishing and you can't use it because the whole part of the publishing has to equal 100. All writers have to be accounted for. On the record label side or the master, again, an independent artist can own their recording. They also have to give permission. So again, even if, let's say, the independent artist is fine with $1,000, it doesn't mean the song is $2,000. You have to pay total for one side and total for the other. We have to get this song to be, so if it was $10,000, the label side has to be $10,000. So the song is now $20,000. You went from thinking your song was $2,000 to now being $20,000. So it's a dance, it's a negotiation. Also, how is the song being used? Let's pretend in Kate's film that this song's being used in a party and 2 characters walk into a party, they're drinking, it's a frat party. The guy grabs the girl, drags her up, takes her upstairs. We hear the music, and then while they're in the room where there's some naughty shenanigans that is not consensual happens, we hear the music. For me as a songwriter, I don't want my song in a scene like that. I have the right to say no, right? You could offer me $1 million and I can say no. So with music, it has to do with money. It has to do with how it's being used. It has to deal with, what's the timing, relationships, all those different things. So it's not like a one size fits all kind of situation, because I've definitely worked on independent projects where we've gotten a very iconic artist to approve a song at our budget because of my relationship and because I said, look, you guys are going to love this story, right? And sometimes people just say, Jen, I love working with you, but I don't like what the story of the film's about, and I don't want my music in it. And you have to respect that. Sometimes it's not about money. Sometimes it's about what's the content.
Another layer is like, where is it now? You also have to talk about, what do you want rights for? Like, is it for film festivals? Is it for YouTube? Is it for HBO? Like, there's so many layers, which is why hiring someone like Jen is crucial if you're doing a lot of big songs and music.
Well, even small songs. Like, I work on original music. I work with composers. Like, music supervisor is not just about pre-existing music. Also, for you as a filmmaker, you have to know what you want to do with your project, right? Are you doing film festivals? Are you having conversations with sales agents? If you don't know what the outcome of your project is, people in music are not going to approve, right? They just don't approve willy-nilly because they want to know where their music's going to be. How is it going to be shown? Is it a first-time director? Is it a seasoned director? Like, all these things matter. Who's cast in it? Are there any producers? Is there a production company? Is there distribution? All these things matter in order to get you through the finish line. And also, something a lot of people don't realize, especially in music, union or non-union recordings. I don't care. It doesn't matter if your production is non-union. Music that also has union fees attached. So even if, let's pretend you're a non-SAG signatory, you still have to pay SAG fees on music, right? And that's a separate thing that someone like me can figure out the math, do the mathing. And there's different layers for that, right? So, even if you're a small independent project, you are not, away from having to pay for music union fees. And if you are hiring, Chris, I'm sure as a composer, you've run into this. You're hiring musicians on your track. If they're union musicians, you have a problem if you're a non-union signatory as a film for AFM. So there's a lot of these intricate things that, as a filmmaker, this is why you hire people that know this stuff and try to say, I'm going to save a buck and do everything, because it's the difference between your film getting distribution or not. I'm sure Chris can go into this, but music is the number one reason projects don't get distribution. It's the number one reason, because the deliverables aren't correct. Things you're thinking about are not correct. And there is definitely this myth that the distributor will pay your music fees. That's not true. You as the producer have to pay all fees, and then it gets licensed out to another party. So don't think oh, I'm going to put a giant, huge, I'm going to put a big Beyonce song, and when Netflix buys it, they're going to pay for that. You have to clear it. You have to pay for it. All those different things.
Especially someone like Netflix, they're notorious for when they have, say you watch Supernatural now, a lot of music has been changed because they don't want to pay the rights for those songs they had originally. So that is definitely true. Chris, do you have anything else to add just on the specific acquiring music rights from the legal side?
Just in terms of where you would find out who the rights holders are, because that's kind of the first step in determining who you're going to have to negotiate with. Like Jennifer mentioned, there are these performing rights organizations like BMI and ASCAP. And in case anyone on the call hasn't heard of those before, those are organizations that collect royalties for artists, essentially. And you can go to their website and often type in information about a song, the song name or the artist name or something like that. And hopefully you can find the people who you're going to need to contact to get the necessary licensing. There are also some music clearance services and platforms like Song Trust and Music Vine. Those are examples of services that you might be able to use to get this information. And there's also something called the Harry Fox Agency, which deals with these types of licensing matters. So yeah, just in terms of trying to find out who holds the rights, which is sort of the first step. And then, of course, you're always going to need a license agreement, which ideally is going to be the product of your negotiation with the publisher, or if you're dealing with someone on a really independent level, maybe you're just talking to the artist. or you're talking to a record company or whatever, you're going to want to get something in writing. But that's not just true if we're talking about an established artist, or even if we're talking about a human being. If you want to use AI generated music, you're still going to have to get an agreement with the music generation site that you've gotten the AI generated music from. Or if you're using pre-existing library music, then you're going to want to make sure that you have a license agreement. And sometimes you'll be just looking at the standard terms and conditions of the site. Those will be the terms that govern any kind of license that you get for the music. But it's important to remember that on sites like MusicBed and Artlist and Pond5 and so on, there are often multiple tiers of license. And so you want to make sure you have the license that you buy, the license that allows you to screen a film that includes music. Because sometimes the most basic license won't necessarily allow that, or it will only allow it in a very limited scope. And so it might allow it just for film festivals, for instance, but not necessarily for like nationwide theatrical screenings. You know, it's awesome if that's what you're going for, but if that's what you're doing, then you want to make sure that you have the tier of license that allows you to do that.
Also, something to think about, sites like Artlist and MusicBed and everything. When you're buying those tiered licenses, you need to check with your distribution, because most of those licenses are not accepted for distribution, right? That for film festivals, it's fine. If you want to put it on YouTube, it's fine. But when you're talking about selling your film or licensing your film for an additional fee to get back your thing, those licenses are not valid. So I have been hired on films where for film festival, they used a ton of Artlist music. And then for distribution, they said, So I had to come in and redo all the music on a film. So, you know, again, and then that's paying like all this extra thing. I know the music's cheap and all this and that, but really to bring your project from idea to fundraising, to development, to production, to post, to sale, or even distribution, you have to think about those things, right? I know people are like, oh, it's cheap, it's fast, it's all this, but you may not be able to sell your film, or maybe someone's interested in it, but you don't have the right music licenses. So then you, again, not the distributor, you have to go pay to get everything taken out and redo it, which is also very expensive, not just for music and a person, but also opening up your cut. We all know how much that costs to have to reopen up a cut and, you know, tinker in it, recut, do all those things. It can be extremely expensive, right? So these are things that you definitely need to like look at and have those conversations about which tier, which distributors accept this. And at the end of the day, you as a producer, even if Netflix licenses from you, you're liable, right? And a lot of those sites take music illegally from independent artists and claim they have the rights to it. Places like Artlist have been sued countless times by artists and musicians that they are claiming they have rights to my music and they don't. So again, you kind of have to do the vetting as well, you know, to mitigate your risk on what you want to do for your project as well.
I know that, Jen, you've in the past mentioned that you feel like even if someone uses that song on Artlist, if you really love it, that you recommend going to the artist directly and getting the rights directly, not getting it from Artlist.
Yeah. I mean, if let's pretend, you know, Alex A is the artist and I really loved his song Alex, I don't know if you're a male or female because I can't see you, but Alex, really love Alex's song. I'm going to go to them and say, hey, I'm working on this project. This is what I'm looking. Can you license it to me directly? And then you can do a license directly through that instead of going through Artlist, because Alex A might say, how did you find my song? It's on Artlist. I don't have to deal with Artlist. Or they might say, you have to go talk to Artlist for my deal, right? So again, you kind of have to play the game kind of thing, because a lot of artists and songwriters and creators don't actually know music business. I just wrapped a film where, you know, this artist, I love her. The director loves her, and her 4 co-writers took a crash course on music business from me because they didn't understand the difference on things for me to bring it home, right? It was like, you know, I make a joke, a music detective, therapist, everything in between. So it's just, again, having to do all those different due diligence about what is my risk mitigation. Some distributors say, we don't care that you have Artlist because if something happens, you're liable, we're off the hook. So, you just, again, as the producer, the creator, you need to figure out where your risk thing is. I am not a lawyer. I always advise like low risk stuff. But again, at the end of the day, it's your project, your name, and your liability on the line.
The other thing is about sites like Artlist is you have to maintain their license.
Mm-hmm.
So if your film is out there for 10 years, you have to pay for Artlist for 10 years. So that's another downside to if you're like, I would never use them for a feature. Short film, maybe quick. Mostly we use Artlist for like quick YouTube things. It's something that I don't care. It's probably not going to be up after another year or two. A great question from Alex. I understand it takes a long time to get music cleared. Should you start the process during pre-production? Also, should you have 2 or 3 songs as backups in case your first choice is not available or too expensive?
So for pre-production, the thing is we need to know use and timings. If we don't have anything to film to try music, like part of my job is, suggesting music because music has to bend to picture. Picture doesn't bend to music, and you can't change an actor's performance. But if I know for end credits, we're going to want to use insert big copyright, I'm going to start now, right? So that's why if someone like me to kind of look at the creative overall, figure out our budget, our timeline for stuff, anything that's on camera, singing, dancing, anything with music that you're going to be filming to, you need to clear that before you film, right? And again, just because you think it's an old song does not mean you can do whatever, because then if that song gets clear or denied or outside your budget or something, then you're in trouble. Also, you have to do a lot of things, especially for my job, that you have to figure out before you start filming. So if we're singing on camera, I have to get the song cleared. Does my actor know how to sing? Are they comfortable? I have to make sure the lyrics are there. I have to do a pre-record with the actor because if they're singing live on set, that's great. But what about in post-production when something happens? Your music supervisor needs to be on set only if there's on-camera needs. Otherwise, we don't need to be there. It's a waste of time and money for everyone. So again, it's about strategizing with your team because we are the music department head about those things. Because if you don't know how music's being used, you can't just go clear 30 songs, right? Again, back to, working as a team, publishers, labels, independent artists, we're all part of the same team. And again, it's about relationships, right? Like if you're like, I really want to use this X copyright. I'm like, look, they take 6 months to get back. I got to call, make a conversation now to start this, right? And then it's all these different things because music changes. You might say in post, like, we really wanted to use that LL Cool J song, but it turns out it just doesn't bend properly. It changes the story, the characters, then, the being of the story, then we have to swap it out with something else. So it just depends on what it is. I wouldn't start clearing everything that you have an idea for pre-production, because also if you're clearing 30 songs for one spot, you're not creating a relationship with the publishers and labels because it's a lot of work on their side. Oh God, this filmmaker's emailing me. I'm just going to ignore them because they asked for 30 songs and they used none.
John says for screenwriters, using a music reference as a draft stage is safe. But if it is integral to the story or a plot point, can we lose our copyright for the whole script to the music right holders?
If you produced a script that just had a reference to a song, like Sympathy for the Devil is a Rolling Stone song that seems to appear in virtually every movie with the budget big enough to use it. And if you just said Sympathy for the Devil plays during this scene in the screenplay, that in itself is not an infringement of the, whatever record company owns the rights associated with Sympathy for the Devil. If you reproduce the lyrics in the screenplay, then you've technically copied something. And so that's a copyright infringement, although that might not in itself be a huge deal. When it becomes a copyright problem is when the film is actually made and in post, the Rolling Stone song is actually added into the film. And then when the film is distributed. So you could mention something, and I think that's more of a strategic question. If you mention in a script, Sympathy for the Devil should play here, then I think you may give a potential producer some pause. Well, Sympathy for the, everybody uses that. It's a very expensive song. Are you sure about that? And they may start to doubt your sort of credibility. And so as a strategic matter, I wouldn't recommend referring to a very, like a huge hit song like that. That's obviously going to be very expensive to get the rights associated with.
And, a way to do that in the script, so you can give like a producer or like, for me, I read a script and they're like, yeah, this is our budget. I read the script and I'm like, this is not a $5 million film. This is a $10 million film. Like, I can line produce, you guys. I've been doing this a while, like just reading something. So when you are figuring out those different things, like in The Sopranos, for example, the writer, what's his name? David Kelly. It's early. He would write in there to create texture of like what the different areas are. Like, this character would walk in, rap music was playing. So he said in the script that he was creating a tone to create a different character in a different world. He would write rap music is playing. So for Sympathy for the Devil, you might say this character is blasting rock music, right? Because you're giving a tone to the character and everything without actually saying what it is. Because that still creates what you want to do without saying, hey, I have no idea how much stuff costs, but I'm telling you this is a $5 million film. If it's a $5 million film, you're not licensing Sympathy for the Devil. So, it's again, as a writer, you should be aware of all the different costs, not just for music, but like a helicopter flies in and people start shooting things up. Yeah, it's a $100,000 film. You're like, no, this person doesn't know what they're talking about.
Nadine says, thank you, Jen, Chris, and Jennifer for this panel. Thank you for being here. This is amazing and very helpful. Here is my question. How different is the licensing process for an original versus a cover? And if I'm using a cover, do I have to license both?
Well, if you're talking about recording your own cover of an existing song or using a cover of an existing song, you're going to need you will need a license in that situation. And using the original version of the song, you're also going to need a license. But the difference is that in the case of the cover, what you're going to need, well, like Jen Smith was talking about earlier, you're going to need the performance license if you want to record a cover or you want to use a cover. And actually, you're going to need, strike that. In both cases, you're going to need two licenses. You're going to need the performance license and the recording license, or what's known as the master use license. Because if it's an original, then you need rights associated with the composition, and you also need rights associated with the recording. And then in the case of the cover, you need the rights for the composition of the song, and then you also need rights associated with the recording that the cover artist has done. So in both cases, you're going to need a license. Probably it's going to be a little bit cheaper if you're working with the cover artist, but if it's a really popular song, like, if it's somebody covering Sympathy for the Devil, well, then obtaining the performance rights for that could still be an expensive deal.
I just went through this when we were trying to get music for the short film that Chris and I directed, he produced, because we're going to festivals, and I was like, I really want Take On Me from Aha. And she's like, that's expensive, but here are some covers by the same artists, but aren't that actual song, and you could get these cheaper. So there's so many, that's a problem with music. I think there's so many levels to it that really, like, I don't think I would ever do another film, another feature without a music supervisor to help me get this stuff done. Because even though, like, Chris is a brilliant entertainment lawyer and he knows so much, there's so many just idiosyncrasies to music licensing that I think that Jen knows that none of us even have a thought on.
And also for covers, real quick, a publisher can tell you no. So if I did a cover a Sympathy for a Devil, the publisher's going to ask you, what recording are you using, right? And you say, I'm using Jennifer Smith's cover. They're going to ask you to send what the recording is, and they're going to have to approve it, or it's already in their system as approved licensed cover. A lot of people think, oh, I can just do what I want. It's not true, because again, the publishing, you have to get the publishing cleared to do a cover, right? But they might say, oh, Jennifer Smith's a new artist. We really love her cover. Totally fine, right? So, there are nuances on these different things, and it is their right? Like Taylor Swift does not approve covers. She's very particular. Everyone knows that about her, right? There's a lot of artists that won't approve covers, or they're very particular about stuff. And it becomes a risk. So, I worked on a film, and I had the idea I wanted to get a cover done of a very, very famous song, right? Because just tonally with the scene, I thought we could use these more independent artists because it just fit with the story. But it was a big risk. And I was like, I know I can get this handled. But the risk was I had to get the song recorded. That's a cost. I had to deal with the independent artists. I mean, thank God they weren't with the label, So I had all this pre-work I had to do and pay them to go in a recording studio to do a cover. Then I went out to get the song cleared. and I had to send the cover for the publisher to approve. They loved it. The state loved it. These young artists are getting placements off a song that I had an idea for an indie film, right? But I knew the risk was worth the reward because I knew the talent, I knew the ear, I knew I could go in the studio, I knew I could produce it out really, really, strong, and I knew I could get the job done, right? But it depends on all those little factors that for someone who's been doing this a while, you kind of know what is and what isn't.
Alex A., can you discuss how to clear music that is already in the public domain?
Theoretically, if you are certain that it's in the public domain, then you shouldn't require clearance. You shouldn't need a license because there's no copyright applicable to it. The trick is really finding out whether something is in the public domain. Copyright for a piece of music or for any kind of creative work lasts a long time. Under the existing law, it lasts for the lifespan of the artist plus 75 years. So you may not, even if a song is really old, at least by your reckoning, I mean, depending on what generation you're from, you may think of the 80s as really old, but all the stuff from the 80s, the copyright is not going to have expired. So it's very important to look into that and make sure that you understand the relevant law.
How can someone find out if something's in the public domain for sure?
Well, there isn't really a sort of definitive source for that. Really, if you have the budget, I would have an attorney, make that determination. There are all kinds of blogs and, people writing about which songs and movies and so on are now in the public domain, but you don't often see, lawyers writing about that because a lawyer doesn't want to come out and make a definitive statement like that if they don't have to, and they're not being paid to do it. So talking to a lawyer would be, my recommendation in that situation. If it works in your budget.
So 75 is the United States. Every country is different. So it can be public domain in the United States, but in Mexico, it's not. So you have to go get the rest of the world cleared on that. So every country has a different law of what's public domain. And a lot of songs you think are public domain are not, right? If someone can make an arrangement and copyright an arrangement, right? You could take Beethoven's Fifth, redo the arrangement and copyright that version's not public domain. And for public domain, that's only having to do with the publishing, the recordings. If you wanted to use L.A. Phil's version of Beethoven Fifth, that's traditional. You still have to go clear the recording of the L.A. Phil.
I think this next question from John follows up nicely, which is, how does fair use law affect music rights? How much of a song can be used before a license is required? And if copyright laws change over time, what effect does it have on previous licenses?
When you're claiming fair use, if you successfully claim fair use, then basically what you're saying is, look, I know that I'm using a copyrighted work without a license, but what I'm doing is a fair use. And often to get the doctrine of fair use to apply, in other words, to be protected from liability under copyright law, you have to show that your use of the creative work is transformative. So you're putting it in a different context from the one that it originally appeared in. If you are just having a music track play in the background of your film, usually that does not qualify as fair use, in my view. One factor is the transformative nature of it. Another one is whether you're using it for commercial purposes. And if if this is a movie that you're putting out for money, that you want people to pay to see, which undoubtedly you do, then that's going to be a factor that weighs against you if you're going to go and argue fair use. The situation where fair use might apply to the use of a piece of music might be if you are, let's say you're interviewing the people who wrote a famous song, and then maybe you play small excerpts from the song in the background. If you do that, then I think you're safer than a situation where you just play the whole piece of music during an action sequence in your narrative film. So in the documentary context, that's the most likely case for fair use here, although it's never 100% a slam dunk, because fair use, there are these factors that need to be considered by a court that in heaven forbid, if you ever get sued, they have to think about the transformative use. They'd have to think about how much of the piece you used, like how long the clip is, and they'd have to think about whether it's commercial, like I talked about. So I would err on the side of not trying to rely on fair use in terms of using a piece of music.
Jen, how much of a song can be used before a license is required?
0. You need a license. So if you're playing something for 5 seconds, I know there's that old lady myth of 5 seconds, 10 seconds, it's free. No, you're using someone's intellectual property. So you have to get a license for that. For me, on fair use, when we work in docs, we always have a fair use attorney that looks at it and makes an assessment. If they say it's fair use, that's not a get out of jail free card. Someone could still come after you and you would have to go to court and have that, and a judge would determine.
Give us just the quick answer, Chris, on if copyright laws change over time, what effect does it have on previous licenses?
That will depend on if we're talking about a hypothetical change to the Copyright Act, then it will really depend on what it says. And sometimes the copyright laws effects can be retroactive.
But one thing I want to really talk about, since I have both a composer, singer-songwriter, and Chris, and then Jen Smith, who is a music supervisor who's been working as a producer with music forever. And I'm a director who does probably half of my movies are musicals and the rest are music driven. Let's talk about getting music right. Like, what do y'all feel can help guide filmmakers on getting music right? And especially, Chris, as a composer, how are we talking to our composer to get that right feel?
I think the most important aspect of that is to go and have a meeting with your director, I think, before any kind of music is written, where you have a spotting session and you say, this is where you both decide on where you want each music cue, that is like each discrete piece of music, to go, how you want it to come in. Like, do you want it to come in suddenly? Do you want it to fade in? And the same thing when it comes to determining how the piece of music is going to go out. What kind of emotional tone do you want? And I actually like to work with directors like Jen Page, who don't have a musical background, and they're not trying to tell me, oh, it should be in this key or this tempo or something like that. Because often directors, they tell me something like that, but they don't necessarily know what those terms mean. They just want to feel like they're speaking my language. So if you just tell me, oh yeah. So another thing to tell me, just if you're working with me, my favorite process is if somebody will actually give me examples of what they want the music to sound like.
I do that.
YouTube clips.
I'll be like, I want to feel like Stranger Things meets Goonies. Yeah. And somehow this MFer will figure that out and come back with it.
Yeah, it might take a couple of tries, but it's not going to take as many tries as it would take if you're just figuring it out with no guidance.
When I read a script or anything and I talk to my director and my producers, we talk about the story. It's about the story. It's about the characters. It's about what we want people to feel, right? And when I work with my composers, we don't talk about music. And same thing with my directors. Like, my director's like, I have a music background. I'm like, no. I'm like, do you want to feel more happiness in this cue? What's bumping you? So, when I work with my directors, especially directors that know what they want for music, we have entire conversations that it's kind of not about music, right? Where it's, I love, I guess Joint Sympathy for a Devil, right? And I'm like, great, what do you love about this song? How does it make you feel? Is it the lyric? Is it the tempo? Is it the era? And then Jen's like, well, my dad played this song when I was growing up. Great. Tell me about your dad. Where is he from? And then I can pinpoint little things to help with that different vision. When I read a script, I hear music, right? And I start to build out kind of ideas for music and for characters and all those things. Then you talk to your director because it is a collaborative. Jen's like, okay, our main character, she's like a hardcore rock girl. And I'm like, interesting. Why do you think that? Right. And we have these conversations and it becomes like a creative process where I'm like, great. So let's talk about rock real quick. And you said it's these different things that you're envisioning in your creative, right? So what do you want to feel? Is it bright? Also, who's your demographic? Okay, we're having up and coming film. Who's our demographic? Coming of age film? Is it women? Is it men? Is it across the board? Is it someone from 20s to 50? We want it to sound timeless. What does timeless mean to you? Jen, I really want a nostalgic song. Okay, what's a nostalgic song for you? Every single person here will have a different answer. So it's really about getting into the story and also the creative language with your director, with your producer, with your composer. I have some composers that they're just like, I can't deal with this director. I'm like, I got you. Because my job is kind of like, a person that's like, okay, Chris, I want you to go do your creativity. I don't want you to feel hurt, because if a director's like, I hate everything, right? Like that ding, 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 ding. Chris doesn't want to hear that. I can talk to the director, figure it out and say, hey, Chris, during our spotting session, the director talked about how they don't really like certain tones in the xylophone that you put in here. I think it's really cool and creative, but maybe we can take it down an octave, because creatively I love what you're doing, but it's bumping the director, right? And then if the director these types of things. So it's kind of having that conversation, and you try a lot of things. Sometimes you have a great idea, you try it against the picture and it just doesn't work, and that's okay. Or you listen to a song and say, I don't like it. Okay, you don't have to like it. Tell me what you don't like. Tell me what you wish it did. That's it. And then you kind of build a relationship and a conversation from that.
One more question, and it's actually a good one because we directors get very, and producers as well, we get very tied to temp tracks. So let's have that discussion. I think you should take my advice on this one and don't put any music in your film at all until it's locked, unless it's a musical and needs music. And the reason is that movie needs to work without music. The music only should help what you're feeling, what I'm watching. That film needs to work without music. Also, you're going to get so tied to a song. I am so tied to Aha for our short film. And when I have to put it on YouTube without that song, and I'm going to be explaining to everybody, well, we had this song and it was a better scene, I promise, but not, it's the worst. Like, get the song approved first.
So temp love, for anyone that doesn't know, is I've had a song and a cut for, I've been working on this cut for a year. And now I'm like, oh, I should probably bring in the music team. Your music team conversation isn't in post. It's in pre-production, to be honest, even if you have no on cameras. That's with your composer. That's with your music supervisor. That's in pre-production. It's a common misconception. You just bring someone in post. Also, there's things in your script that you don't realize need to be handled prior. So your rough cut is kind of like your draft, right? And you might, again, I agree with you about the music. Music is supposed to elevate all this stuff. It's not a Band-Aid. Yeah, you can put that in, and then, we can try to go get it cleared, because in order to get it cleared, you have to have use and description and all these different things. But I will probably, because again, your music supervisor is talking to your editor, to your producer, to your director, to everything. And it's like, I know you love Miss Taylor Swift, but from our budget, we just can't have it. So let's talk about what you love, right? And we put the music in the cut so we can see how the music works, right? Because again, music has to bend a picture, right? Is it going to work great? I worked on a very big TV show, and there was this amazing piece of music that we all love, but it was off by 2 frames and we had to replace it. So it was heart-wrenching, but it's fine. So you need to show people how it is. And to be honest, sometimes for approval parties, right, there are certain writers or artists, they want to see a clip. They know the film's not done. They just need to see a clip of that scene so that they can see that there's no shenanigans, or they just need to see it.
Chris, do you have anything to add on to the temp track situation? It's got to be different for you, because as somebody who's now directing, I think you've done what? You're in your 3rd movie now, 4th movie now?
4th, yeah.
And you're also a composer, a songwriter. Like, I would love to hear how your process is working with music on a film you've directed.
I usually am hearing the cue. I mean, where I guess a lot of directors will see the edit in their head as they're on set, I will be hearing the cue. I guess that's helpful to me from a music perspective. Maybe not as much from an editing perspective, but thankfully I have a very good editor who I work with.
Final question. Really, this actually has to be the final question because we're out of time. Alex says, film is often, because it's a great question. Film is often a great place to support new up-and-coming artists. Yes, it is. And I love that. And I don't want to do a whole feature on indie bands. And I want to use all real indie bands. And I love this. Where do you go and what do you do what do you listen to find these new artists?
Indie bands, especially for film, I think is really great. There's a time and a place for certain music. But there's also a lot of really great catalogs that haven't been discovered. I did an entire film with all 70s music, authentic 70s music that was a lost catalog, which in my mind was an indie band. For indie bands, literally, it's so many places, right? I'm like, oh, I really love this. Yes, I know all the DSPs are horrible, but I'm an old school nerd. I read liner notes. Oh, I really love this track. Who produced it? And then I go down a thing. Oh, they worked with this new artist, or I love this songwriter. I work in the music industry, so I know a lot of independent people. I go to a lot of different events that are not always with like big labels and publishers, right? I go see live music a lot because I love live music. I read blogs. I go on the internet. Like, I'm just always doing that stuff. As I said before, one big thing you have to be careful about with indie bands is the music business aspect. Because I can love this band, but trust me, I'm like, I can't put them in a film. They don't have their stuff together, right? There's an uncleared sample in here. We can't license their film, right? But I love to listen to them. Might be like, hey, you should go talk to this person to get your business buttoned up so you can like have an entire revenue stream for your career. I love using indie bands in my projects. I wish more directors would let music supervisors use indie bands because they're so like, oh my God, I can't. I'm like, look, this singer, she's amazing. She lives in Nashville. She's really great. It's the emotion and tonality of her vocal is what we need, but she's not famous.
One of the best parts about what you're saying too is, and I've seen this happen, is you put in that unknown band, artist, whatever, and by the time your film comes out a year later, that artist has blown up. And now you already have them for cheap in your movie.
And that's also part of my job is like A&R. I can't tell you how many artists I have put in projects, and by the time it either came out or it was about to come out, that all of a sudden they skyrocketed. And and they're just like, wait, how did you know this person blow up? I'm like, I have an ear for music. It's my job.
I'm always seeing bands on TikTok that I'm like, this song is great. And it's just them being like, we're still a small band who replies to your comment, and like they're trying to grow their audience. So that's a great way to discover new people too, is just social media. We are out of time, but I would love if Chris and Jen, if you have one final thought about the whole music process.
Well, like I said in the beginning, it's just important to make sure that you document everything. Putting my lawyer hat on, even if you got a song or the rights to use a song from a friend who happens to be in a band or something like that, you don't want to do that based on a handshake because, unfortunately, if you have the high quality problem of making money at some point, then they might be coming back to you with their hat in their hand, regardless of what you think their relationship is with you right now. So just be safe in that sense.
Music is a collaborative medium, bringing on the right team for your project, right? Someone who actually knows what they're doing. Music does cost money. So even if you have a small film, pay that indie band a few $100 or something, because it costs them a lot of money to record it, to take lessons. That $200 would mean a lot to them, right? Music costs money. Maybe you don't have $30,000, but $500 or something could really put money like gas in their van to go tour, right? So again, we are all creatives. We have to respect our fellow creatives. So please pay people. Again, $200 can go a long way for an upcoming artist.
Thank you both for being here. We'll see you on the next one.